To start with, you have predicated your argument upon responding to feminist assertions that feminism is a synonym for equality. It should be noted that feminism, like so many other movements, is constantly evolving, so it may not be a synonym for equality right now, but it is a movement that's making strides to be such, and in one way or another, it addresses many of the issues that you claimed it doesn't. You first addressed the alarming rape statistics of men in prison, citing the Human Rights Watch maintaining that at least 100,000 to 140,000 men are raped each year in prison, and that number constituted half of the entire population of individuals raped in the United States. However, turning to a more reputable source, the United States Department of Justice, specifically the Bureau of Justice Statistics, which estimated that there were approximately 300,170 rape and sexual assault crimes committed. But those statistics are in the most favorable light because they do not account for the instances in which individuals were unable to express their consent or non-consent, and they do not account for individuals who may be unwilling to express their sexual assault of the crime. In 2012, the Center for Disease Control maintained that 1 in 5 women were raped in comparison to 1 in 71 men, which expresses the worst case scenario. So in fact, women are more susceptible to being raped. Nevertheless, we can agree that this is an issue that needs to be taken seriously and that action must be taken, but it should be noted that it has already been taken on behalf of the feminist movement. Feminist news organizations such as Everyday Feminism and authors such as Claire Cohen in Male Rape is a Feminist Issue have recognized such. Further, as noted by the American Medical Association, rape is the most underreported violent crime. This goes back to the main theoretical goal of feminism, which is to dismantle patriarchy. Patriarchy is essentially an unjust social system that places men and women in gender roles and is oppressive to both parties. Feminist action has been taken on behalf of male sexual assaults, and these actions are directly linked to the dismantling of patriarchal structure. While some second-wave feminists such as Dale Spender have used what can be interpreted as man-hating rhetoric, third-wave feminists have recognized the unfairness and ineffectiveness of such approach. Their target is the overarching idea of masculinity, rather than male bodies themselves. Masculinity and patriarchy tend to go hand in hand. This type of masculinity discourages male bodies to report or even to admit to sexual assault, because doing so would be to demean their masculinity and would be a recognition of subordination. This has been the driving force within the normalization of prison rape, and feminists have taken acts, both in theory and practice, to eradicate such notions. And it should be noted that the fear that men have to be raped in prison is the same fear that women have in everyday environments. Second, you claim that men make up half of the victims of domestic violence, but nothing is being done on this front as well. The Bureau of Justice Statistics estimates that there are approximately 1.1 million cases of domestic violence, with a substantial amount being instances of intimate partner violence. However, those are only the cases that have been reported, because as the Huffington Post estimates, only 25% of instances are reported. At worst, it is estimated that approximately 4.7 million women are the survivors of domestic violence each year. The Center for Disease Control estimates that 24% of women and 13.8% of men have been victims of domestic violence. Again, we can agree that this is an issue that needs to be addressed, and once again, it is being addressed. On a larger level, domestic violence of men also goes back to the overall idea that men will be seen as weak if they are being abused by women. Feminism works to dismantle that long-standing idea by abolishing that stigma. From a practical approach, we see that men are able to obtain restraining orders, and according to the Huffington Post, 37 states have domestic violence statutes with gender-neutral language. While yes, more needs to be done in the remaining states, these efforts have been taken. Further, many shelters are taking on practices to help male domestic violence survivors, even if the name indicates the contrary. Also, feminism does not purport that all men are privileged. Feminist theorists realize that many men are disadvantaged by the system, and this includes minority men, men of lower socioeconomic status, and LGBTQ men. While your analysis concluded that feminism makes blanket statements, you made one yourself. You failed to account for a new central tenet of feminism, that being intersectionality. This idea was most notably coined by the feminist legal scholar Kimberly Crenshaw. It is essentially recognizing the different intersections one might have foremost being gender, race, class, and sexuality, and how these different intersections might disadvantage one structurally, politically, and representationally, which really cuts to the heart of the matter. It's not that men aren't disadvantaged, but rather that their intersectionality within the existing patriarchal system places them 10 steps ahead of any given woman. But in other ways, it also disadvantages them. Like in the case of male rape and domestic violence. In order to repair that inequality, steps must be taken to eradicate the overarching system that's in place. Lastly, you stated that because you are a woman, you have several advantages over men, namely more of a likelihood to gain custody of your child within a divorce proceeding, less sentences for the same crime. Your rape accusations will actually be taken seriously, and you have more of a likelihood of going to college or obtaining a job because of quotas that may be in place. With respect to child custody, that speaks to the biases within individuals in a system that by default sees women as caretakers. Such a notion is predicated on the idea that women are more equipped to care for children, which is the same reasoning that has been used to keep women out of the workplace, deprive them of the right to vote, and has kept the glass ceiling firmly in place. Further, it should be noted that in the 1800s, women, unlike men in our current time, were unable to even have the chance to gain custody of their children because they were seen as the property of the father. However, early feminists like Susan B. Anthony worked to gain women's rights to their children. The solution is to create an unbiased system that sees the potential for both men and women to be proper caregivers of children, allow women to be in the workplace, and to allow fathers to take on a more nurturing role, which proves to be the aim of feminism. Turning to the assertion that women receive less criminal sentences for the same crime. This too is based on the assumption that women are weak and are unable to take harsher sentences. Nevertheless, the proper course of action shouldn't be to advocate for longer sentences for women, but rather to fix the criminal justice system and shrink the increasing prison industrial complex. You also asserted that because you're a woman, your rape accusation will be taken more seriously, but there is serious evidence to the contrary. Given that many women's rape accusations are still waiting to be investigated, given the large number of rape kits that are yet to be examined. Further, as noted by the new film The Hunting Ground and the op-ed essay Harvard UN, rapes on college campuses continue to be an ever-growing problem, yet to be fully handled. Not to mention the multitude of transgendered women, women of color, and sex workers whose allegations are most notably accompanied by a shred of doubt. Finally, you mentioned that the presence of quotas allows for easily accessible college enrollment and gainful employment thereafter graduation. We need only look to the United States Supreme Court cases to see that gender quotas are rare and not put in place lightly. The court noted in Mississippi University of Women v. Hogan that quotas that seek to enforce gender stereotypes and the exclusion of males in those fields are directly prohibited. Only those classifications that can be said to be a remedy to disproportionate burdens are to be held permissible. We see in a more recent case of United States versus Virginia that those efforts to advance women in the workplace in order to gain equity would in fact pass constitutional muster. Any efforts to bring women to equity and parity are not disadvantageous to men. Rather, they're an effort to right a burden that has long been in place. So we see that in some ways we're really on the same page, and that if you were to look more closely, you would see that feminism is an adequate and even exceptional remedy to the issues you raised. Nevertheless, feminism, like any other movement, needs to be targeted towards very specific goals in order to be successful. While feminism may not be able to address every possible human issue, it can serve as an ally to other movements, and it can serve as a vehicle towards the overall goal of equality.